A very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show, we take a look at the very biggest stories that have developed over the weekend, as well as take a look at what's making headlines internationally and locally. I shall be joined by Honorable Arthur Adera, ex-legislator for Teso North, as well as Honorable Joe Mutambo, ex-Mungi Central Member of Parliament. To kick this off, let's start off with what's making headlines internationally and see what we need to be focusing on in terms of our knowledge of what's happening in the region. That's where we're starting off, closer to home. Now, what you're seeing there on your screen is the East African. You're being told to spending the holidays we are spending the holidays touring the slopes of Kilimanjaro. Pictured there, we see some tourists right there having a good time. Most people head off to warmer places in the world to enjoy their holidays, and Kilimanjaro is obviously, as this paper is telling us, one of the better destinations and more preferred ones. Let's take a look at what's happening to the west in Uganda. Bobi Wine, opposition leader, has told President Yoweri Museveni, "My supporters are not fools." Glaring scenes of verbal confrontation between NUP presidential candidate Robert Kyangulanyi, that is Bobi Wine, and NRM presidential candidate Yoweri Kaguta Museveni continue. Now let's take a look at what's happening on the CNN, and we're told UK cut off over new variant fears, and that has to do with a new strain of the coronavirus that has been reported there, even though some medical specialists do say that the vaccine that has been rolled out in various parts of the world will still be efficient when it comes to helping boost the not boost the economy, but boost the immunity of those who take it. So that's a developing story. Let's see how that goes. And the BBC are told COVID nations impose UK travel ban over that new variant. European nations have begun to impose travel ban as the UK on the UK after it reported a more infectious and what they're terming here is out of controlled coronavirus variant. And the Al Jazeera this morning tells us, will anti-government protests, Soleimani killing, decide 2021 in Iraq? That has to do with local politics and the disquiet with how the current government is performing, from Soleimani's assassination to nationwide anti-protests in a protest. Al Jazeera reviews Iraqi's main events this year. So you can take a look at that and see what more you can learn about what's happening around the globe. But locally, let's take a look at the papers and see what's being focused on. The situation in Nairobi is one of the biggest stories that's being covered widely, and we're told that there's a hunt beginning for the Nairobi governor, obviously, given that impeachment that happened a few days ago. And the Standard this morning is focusing on the education situation, and we shall kick off with that. We're told job losses and reduced incomes owing to the coronavirus are forcing transfer of pupils from high-cost private schools to public institutions, even as parents brace themselves for fees, school uniforms and COVID-19 mitigation charges. More details on page 2. I'll start with you, Honorable Odera. What do you make of this one? Obviously, we're expecting this given the situation at hand.
I mean, clearly the threat by the health minister has backfired. The threat to health workers to report back or get sacked has backfired, because now...
Yes, indeed, Honorable Odera. But before we get into that, let's talk about what's happening with the schools. We are seeing an increase of transfers from the private schools to the public schools because it is cheaper, and there's going to be these charges, COVID mitigation charges, and far from that, we have parents bracing themselves from school fees they probably hadn't planned for, or their budgets were thrown off because of that gap we had earlier on in the year, and then we have uniforms, so many costs. So when you see this is the main headline on the Standard. What comes to mind?
Obviously, it means the parents have been heavily impacted by COVID. But remember also, Trix, that before COVID came around, the economy was already doing badly.
Yes.
It has only exacerbated the economic impact on parents. And it is, I think that, you know, that inability to keep their children in these preferred schools is only one of the symptoms of the economic impact of COVID. There is going to be an impact on food availability and food security for Kenyans. There's going to be an impact on Kenyans' ability to generally afford the cost of living. You have people being thrown out of houses. You have businesses being shut. So So the focus on schools is right, because
Yes.
really we are creating the future generation, and it's going to be impacted. The quality of education delivered to children is going to be affected. Children, some of them have been learning online, but again, the learning online is only available to those children that live in places where network is available to start with, or the parents are able to afford the devices that they've been using to learn. So it is a much bigger impact. And I think the transfer of children from preferred schools to less costly schools is only one of those symptoms we are seeing. It's a very important one, but it helps us to see that there's a big impact. But I think to understand it more, you need to dig deeper into the effects on even those that are not transferring, but probably have not been able to, they're not able to go back to school because the parents cannot feed them.
Indeed.
They're not able to go back to school because the parents have no fees at all for secondary schools, for example. They're not able to go because parents are unable to do some of the things you've just mentioned, buy them books, uniforms, or generally the cost of what you would call the opportunity cost. Instead of your child going to school, some parents prefer that the child becomes economically productive, keep them at home so that, to help them mitigate the overall economic effect of COVID. So it's a widespread effect, and that's an important symptom worth paying attention to.
Yes. Now, Honorable Mutambo, I'll draw your attention to some of the figures that we're being told here. 135 is the number of private schools that have closed, never to reopen, according to the Kenya Private Schools Association. And then we have 1.7 million is the number of Kenyans who lost their jobs between April and June, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. So you can imagine if some of them were paying these school fees that are higher in private schools, it's such a difficult time. What do you make of this development? Is it expected? Is it, do you think it is a story that is worth the prioritization it's been given on the Standard this morning?
Any pandemic comes with consequences, and those are some of the unfortunate consequences we are facing as a country, as a nation. It is very important to note that it is very true some schools were operating actually under bare minimum. And when they were hit with this COVID, they could not even go further. They could not keep afloat, so to speak. It is very difficult because private schools are business. They run them as business.
Yes.
This is business. And when your business is not breaking even, you cannot proceed. And we know very well that most of the schools who are affected are those schools whereby they did not meet all the protocols, and not only meeting the protocols, whereby the parents also feel that the fees are too high, and we cannot take our children back to the same school because we cannot afford. Remember, everyone, and not only the school owners, everybody has been affected by this COVID. Business has not been doing well, and where people have been getting their living, they do not have that kind of resources anymore. And that's why parents are opting to go the government way and say we're going to take our children to government schools because they are basically for free, so not that free. Number two, people are also looking at how safe the school is. So there's a lot to look into when we are accounting for this misnomer, which has actually hit us below the belt. I feel for the schools, for the school owners, because they are not doing so because they so wish. They are doing so because it was their way of living, and whatever they lost, they did not lose it because they wanted to. They lost it because, one, the COVID came, they had to send teachers home. When you are sent home for 1 year, what do? You go and look for other alternative. There are other teachers who turned out to be matatu drivers, who turned out to be border riders, and they find it happier there that they are making their money. They may not go back to school. I know a case of a teacher who bought a motorbike, and he is not going to go back to start to class to teach. So all those effects are a combination of what we are seeing today. So the result of what is happening is the result of the effect of COVID, and we should accept it. And we should now start knowing how to live with it and adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Now, those schools that have been closed, the National Parents Association Chairperson Nicholas Mayo is saying it is in the government's interest to ensure that they survive. Do you think the government is doing all it can do, Honorable Dera, to ensure that these schools are surviving?
I don't think that the government at this point, probably that's not one of its priorities as a matter of fact. And if we are being honest, at the moment, I think the government is focusing most of its attention to reopening of schools. And that applies mostly to public schools. And of course, enablement of the private schools as well to open and give all the guidelines in relation to how schools will open, when they will open, and the kind of protocols and safety guidelines that will enable the children to be safe and for them to go to school. I think that reviving or keeping the private schools afloat is an economic consequence, is an economic strategy that needs to come with the overall revival of the economy. And you know, some of these shocks to the economy keep coming. And for me, the fact that there are private schools that have closed must then help us in future as a test to make sure that some of whatever the licensing of private schools and the overall process of approvals of private schools will now be guided accordingly, so that the children who then go to those private schools do not suffer closure of those schools because of the economic shocks that keep coming every now and then. So that needs to be factored in future in terms of how we authorize, how we run the private schools, so that there must be a bare minimum. I mean, every business must be able to withstand certain tests. And these are tests that COVID is just a big one that has exposed a lot of the weaknesses we have, but there are others that keep coming along. And I think that it's unfair. You feel for the children when private schools are closed, when public schools are closed, and therefore, because we need private schools, we need public schools, we need them to be open when they are all open, and therefore, so that people have choice and children have proximity to the schools that they can get to. And they also have a choice to go to the school that they prefer or that their parents prefer. So that is part of our economy is at that point now. And therefore, my view is the government, I don't see what the government is doing at the moment. I'm not privy to anything, but I think that it is fair to accept that that must be paid attention to. However, it may not be a big priority at the moment.
It's low on priority list of the government. Honorable Mutambo, what do you make of that?
Yes, I know the government may say that, oh, it may be perceived the government is doing a lot to make sure that the private schools are open. But mind you that these are private-owned entities. These are, even though they follow the procedures laid down by the same government, but these are private-owned business. This is where we need to start. This is where the line is. It is private. It is my business. This has got nothing to do with the government, apart from checking the procedures that are followed and the rules and regulations which government has set aside. So I don't think government will go out there and fund a private. There is no law. There's no law to fund a private school. Government to fund a government. Government to fund a private school. There is no basis to do that. This is individual responsibility. It is my responsibility. It is my business. It is my school. It is me who is supposed to do this. The only thing government is supposed to do is to make sure that if I want to reopen this school, all the COVID protocols are followed, all the procedures, learning procedures are followed. This is what government can do, and the only thing they can do is just to encourage the investors not to close the school, because there will be spillover, because we do not have enough facilities. We may not have enough classrooms to take all these schools into. You know, it may be so easy that we are going to close private schools. Where will those children go? They will have to go back now to government schools, and the government schools, I can tell you, I know they are filled. They are shocked. They are shocked by the numbers they are getting every day. So what will happen next. So it may be to the interest of the government to see the private school reopening back as much as they have no business to interfere with what is happening management-wise. But my view is that the government has got no role to play in a private school, because apart from supervision to make sure that the procedures and the protocols are followed.
Right.
But when it comes to management side, to invest money, to do all those kind of things, the only thing the investors can do is either to ask the government to talk to the bank and let the banks, either lower the rates or become a bit lenient on the financial arrangement, because it's all about financial muscle to reopen the school. Because if my school do not have all the equipment required for me to do that, I may need money to put them in place, and I may not have that money because I've been down for almost a year. So those are the things we are talking about. But I don't think that it is the interest for the government to fund private schools, and I don't see it doing so.
And as far as hot topics go, politics is never too far from the headlines. On the front page of the Daily Nation this morning, we are told Ruto in epic battle for the soul of Western Kenya. Now, buoyed by the recent victory in Msambweni, the Deputy President William Ruto takes the war to Kakamega and Bungoma. This is what is being said on the front page. Seen as strongholds for ODM leader Raila Odinga, where Matungu and Kabuchai by-elections also put ANC's Musalia Mudavadi and Ford Kenya's Moses Wetangula in the mix. What do you think is going to transpire? Could you perhaps look into your crystal ball, Mr. Honorable Odera, and tell us what you foresee happening in these terms? Do you think he is right in having that confidence that he can actually influence how these areas shall be voting?
You know, at the moment, the by-elections provide an opportunity for, of course, the DP and the Handshake brothers as well, to try and generate momentum for 2022. It is inevitable that it will be seen through the prism of the prospects for 2022.
Right.
Now, I think that Msambweni was a big win for the Tanga team, and the Deputy President will be excited about that, I'm sure. It is, as you look towards, for example, as you look towards, say, Machakos, Western Kenya, and now Nyamira, as the people prepare to do battle for those seats, it is important, I think, for Msambweni to remember that there is a big factor called Salim Vuria, which is grossly underestimated, and it is not talked about. I think that the presence, the profile, and the activities of Salim Vuria played a big role. Secondly, there was a big role that was played by the Mijikenda, the internal Mijikenda dynamics. While the Sultan sought to sort of have his way, he wanted to spread his influence, or rather show his influence in the larger coastal region. The internal dynamics are such that the South Rift, the South Coast group, which is generally the DIGO, felt that, you know what, we can make our own decisions. And we're going to make our own decisions independent of you. We have our own leader called Salim Vuria, and therefore we are going to go the way we want, not the way you want us to go. While the Tanga team had a better strategy, if you ask me, and overall they had a better candidate as well. Before the election, when I listened to Sheikh Juma Ngao make a statement that was so unlike him, essentially going ethnic or racist about the independent candidate, I felt there was desperation setting in, and I knew that this was headed the wrong way for the ODM team. However, coming to Western Kenya, Western Kenya is a huge vote block. Let's take the old Western province. That is a massive vote block. Anybody with the ambitions of becoming president of Kenya would want to court Western Kenya, would want to get Western province. Now, Matungu, I read that the ANC has already picked a candidate, because that seat was ANC. The late Murunga was an ANC guy, even though he was tending towards the Tanga group at some point in his career. It is going to be a massive battle, and I can see that, you see, when you talk about regions delivering votes, regions come with regional kingpins, inevitably. There are people who communities see as their leaders, and they will want to listen to them, because those are the guys that come to the table to negotiate for whatever it is that being negotiated for as people want to enter government. I see, therefore, in Western, that for Matungu, for Kabuchai, the Honorable Moses Wetangula will play a big role.
Right.
The Honorable Musalia Mudavadi will play a big role. Francis Atwoli will want to play a big role. I don't know whether he will. I am sure that Amos Wako will be roped in. Bunyasi, John Bunyasi, the Honorable John Bunyasi will be roped in to try and deliver that seat. And I think that the theme of Luhya unity or Western unity will kick in big time. To try and consolidate Luhya unity, try and consolidate Western unity, and come to the table with a bloc that can be used for negotiation. Okay. So I think that as the DP and his team strategize for those seats, especially Kabuchai and Matungu, they will be up against a huge force that is trying to unite Western and come to the table as one united bloc, which gives force to negotiation.
Indeed. Honorable Mutambo, the Daily Nation this morning says Ruto in an epic battle for the soul of Western region, while the Standard on page 10 tells us about ANC candidate for Matungu Minipol causing disquiet as rivals fight back. What do you make of this politics that is unraveling, and do you think what's happened in Msambweni shall be a reflection, or perhaps might be a sort of, just reflection of what will happen in Western Kenya?
It may be a reflection of what is happening in Western Kenya in two fronts. One, if the nomination of a candidate is bungled. You see what happened in Msambweni, that ODM actually bungled their own nomination. And it is their own man who won from the other side, who was taken by DP Ruto. He was supported independently, and he won. He wore a different color. It's just like having a good striker. Then you throw them away, you don't take care of them, they go to the other team and they win against you. They score against you. That is simply what happened in Matungu. Number two, in Msambweni, the so-called kingpins of the coast felt that they are the people who should spearhead the campaign of Msambweni, and they never let the locals, the people on the ground, because politics is local. And when you go there and you negate the views, you negate the participation of the locals, and you want to take everything by yourself, and this is what Joe did. Joe tried to muscle everybody out of this campaign. If it is Raila, he wanted to control Raila. If it is whatever arrangements for the campaign, he wanted to control everything. And people were down, because I normally go there. I normally go to Coast. I normally go to Kuala. I normally go to Msambweni. And I know very well. There are so many Kabas who live there. And I know the stories which are going around. Joe wanted to show that I'm the king of Coast, and there's nobody else, and I'm the one who can do this. And those politics are long gone. People have independent minds to decide for themselves what they want. They did not listen to that. If we go to Matungu with the same narrative, I want to tell you they will have a repeat of the same happening in Matungu in Western. I want to agree with what my friend is saying, that there is what is perceived to be like a Luo unity, which looks to be so elusive every moment. Yeah. Because the problem is you cannot have a unity of a community with 5 or 6 different leaders pulling from a different position, and each of them trying to be a kingpin or trying to be the master of that region. Indeed. And a good example is in Ukambani, when we have everybody trying to outshine each and every other, and they want to be the kingpin. We have more than 5 or 6 people who want to be a presidential candidate in Ukambani. Where will be the unity come from?
Okay.
The unity cannot come if we cannot come together and reason out together.
Yeah, I'd like you to pause you there. We shall take a short break. When we come back, we shall jump into the way it is. And, of course, that shall be a jumping-off point, the role of kingpins in ensuring democracy thrives in their localities and what sway they have over those populations. But let's take a short break. When we come back, we have that and much more here on Morning Express.